Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's video is going to be primarily for my United States history class, but as always, if you want to stick around and learn a little bit about the War of 1812, you are more than welcome to. So like I said, today's topic is going to be the War of 1812, but before we get into that, I want to go back and review the last two slides of the last video. Now, it's going to be a little bit different of a setup. This is actually the setup of the videos that I had been wanting to make. I just couldn't figure it out. But now that I have the software that I need to put the notes up on the screen and then just have myself down in the corner. That's kind of what I wanted to do from the beginning, and I was playing around with different programs and was able to figure out how to get it how I wanted. So going forward, these videos where I am going over the slides with you, this is what they're going to be like. So if you have the slides on paper or you've downloaded them digitally, you can still do that, but I'm going to have them up on the screen. Now, due to me having my camera on the screen as well, I am going to block some of the text sometime. I apologize for that. But, so let's just go ahead and get started. So, at the end of the last lesson, we were talking about warfare and impressment. And this was due to Napoleon. Napoleon was a French commander, and he was sick and tired of France getting pushed around, so he was going to try to take over all of Europe, and he just about did it. In 1806, Britain was at war again with the French. Britain declared ships going to Europe without British licenses would be seized. Britain's idea was that, well, if they're going to Europe and they're not selling to us, they might be selling weapons or food, supplies, what have you, to the French, who are our enemies. So we're going to shut down any ships that aren't coming here. Napoleon said anyone who followed Britain's system would have their ships seized. So if Napoleon or the French saw a ship that had a British license, oh, well, they must be going to the British. We got to stop them. So American merchants would lose their ships and cargo either way. Bad time to be an American sailor. And the last slide from last time, the British Navy was short on recruits because British sailors would desert to American ships, meaning if they saw an American ship, they would try to swim to them to desert, to get away from their military service. Britain tried to fix this with impressment, or legalized kidnapping and forced into military service. There are a number of stories out there of American sailors who were kidnapped by the British and forced to serve on their ships. But then in 1807 is whenever we have an attack that really brings tensions to a head. In 1807, the British warship Leopard stopped the American ship USS Chesapeake, and when the Americans refused to comply, the Leopard opened fire, killing 3 Americans. So whenever you are a foreign country and you kill citizens, that's going to lead to a declaration of war, or at least some sort of military action. So that's going to bring us to the War of 1812. This is the main topic for this video, and this is America's second war with Britain. So the War of 1812. The decision of war. In 1808, James Madison is elected president. So Thomas Jefferson has come and gone as our president, and now we are with our president, James Madison. At this time, tensions were high with Britain, and it would be up to Madison to see if the U.S. would engage with Britain in war. So it was going to be his decision to see if there was going to be a diplomatic way we could solve this issue, or if it was going to call for a military action. Economic pressures at this time. Madison wanted to avoid war. To force the British to stop seizing ships, he asked Congress for the Non-Intercourse Act. And now what this act would be is this stopped trade with France and Britain, and allowed the president to reopen trade with the country that removed restrictions. So at this time, both the British and the French were both seizing American ships due to the war that they had with each other. But this act that the president asked Congress for would stop trade with both of them, and the president would have the discretion to reopen trade with the country that removed restrictions. So if the British removed their restrictions on American soldiers, the president would reopen trade with Britain, or vice versa with France. Eventually, Congress passed the Non-Importation Act against Britain. So this is what the president asked for. However, Congress passed the act that said that they were not going to do any more business with Britain. Alright, so this is going to lead us to our next topic, which is the Warhawks. Now, a Warhawk is a term that you will still hear thrown around today in politics. A Warhawk it's a term that's usually referred to a member of the Congress who is a little too eager to use military action. You know, obviously, military action should be a last resort for any sort of conflict between countries. But this is a nickname. This is not a name that you want to be called. This is a bad name to be called. But if you are somebody who seems that's like really too eager to use military action to solve a conflict, you could be called a Warhawk. Most members of Congress who wanted war were from the South and West, and they were called the Warhawks by their opponents. Once again, it's a person that is just too eager to use military action. These Warhawks thought America's reputation would be ruined if they did not fight. They were thinking, you know, we're a new country, we're new to all this international action. If we don't fight to defend ourselves, people are going to think that we're weak and they're going to keep pushing us around. Also, the South and West were hurt most by British trade restrictions. So the fact that we were not doing business with Britain is going to hinder certain businesses and farms and things like that. And the South and the West of the United States were hurt the most by this trade restriction. So we're going to talk now about some things that are happening a little closer to home. Increasing demands of speculators and settlers caused problems with natives. A speculator is a person who will buy something to resell later for a higher price. There was a speculator recently in the news who was seen to be a pretty big jerk. You may have seen on the news or on Facebook or social media about a guy that, and I don't know his name offhand, and I wouldn't give it if I did, who went around and whenever all of this virus stuff was just getting started, he went around and bought up a bunch of hand sanitizer and like stockpiled it in his garage and was going to sell it for like way higher price. You could call that a speculator. I got another name for him, but it's not words I would use on this video. But back in these days, speculators were people who would buy land in the United States to resell for higher prices later. Tecumseh, a Shawnee leader, wanted natives to join together to protect themselves. Tecumseh saw that this was going to be an issue. These people were buying up all this land, and then they were just to make money off of it, and this was infringing on the natives' ancestral lands. Knowing Tecumseh was gaining power, William Henry Harrison, who was the Indiana governor at this time, wanted to stop it. So Tecumseh was a Native American leader, and all of these different natives were joining together to join him to fight back against all of this nonsense that was going on. Harrison marched troops to the Tippecanoe River where Tecumseh was. He knew that Tecumseh was near this Tippecanoe River, and so he takes all these military troops there, and the Battle of Tippecanoe commenced. and it ended with 150 deaths on both sides, but shattered Native American confidence in Tecumseh. William Henry Harrison saw that Tecumseh was getting a lot of support from the natives and wanted to shut it down. Many fled to Canada, but their British-made rifles gave Americans an excuse to blame the British. Whenever we're talking about the natives were fleeing to Canada, but a lot of the rifles that the natives had at this time were British-made, so they blamed the British for this Native American uprising. Westerners said war with Britain would enable them to attack Canada and end native attacks. So they were going to use these guns that the natives had all the way in modern-day United States. They were made by the British, so they could use that as an excuse to attack Canada to end the native attacks. That's kind of a stretch if you ask me, but that is essentially what they were going to use as an excuse to attack into Canada to get back at these Native American groups. And this was the western part of the United States was claiming this. Most people in the South and West called for war, but the Northeast did not. Once again, the people in the South and the West, they were citing these Native American attacks. They said the natives were being armed by the British, so we have to go to war to protect ourselves. They're attacking us at the ocean by kidnapping our soldiers. They are arming the natives and then having the natives attack us. The northeastern part of the country did not. They did not want to go to war. The invasion of Canada. Congress called for war against the British, who were mostly posted in modern-day Canada. The British were completely out of the United States, but they were still in Canada. However, the military had fewer than 7,000 troops and very little equipment, and paying for the war would also be difficult. The United States at this time was still paying off debt that they had racked up due to the Revolutionary War, so they're going right into a second war with Britain. So this is going to be expensive. Like we discussed in the first chapter, or whenever we talked about the Revolutionary War, I should say, war is expensive. Back then and today, war is expensive. You got to pay the soldiers, you have to feed them, you have to clothe them, you have to arm them. There's a lot that goes into that. So, paying for the war is going to be difficult because what act did the president just pass? The Non-Importation Act. So now we're not doing business with Britain or France. Well, so that's going to cut down on the money we have coming in. Paying for this war is going to be very difficult. Now, they did go ahead and attack Canada in 3 different ways. The American military planned to attack Canada from 3 sides. They wanted to attack from Detroit, they wanted to attack from Niagara Falls, and the Hudson River. The British had easily defensible position at all 3 attacks, making each American attempt fail. These were places that the British thought that America might try to attack, and these were very poorly chosen places to attack because the British had forts there. They had things in place that made each of these places very easy to defend, and each of these 3 attacks failed. The United States had more success on Lake Erie. This was a naval battle between Commodore Oliver Perry and the British fleet. After a vicious 4 hours, the British surrendered, retaking Lake Erie. Now, of the attacks on Canada up to this time, this was the only one that was successful. By the end of 1813, the Americans had not taken any territory in Canada. This victory at Lake Erie, yeah, it was a victory, but they just retook a lake. A great lake, given that, but by the end of 1813, the Americans had not taken any territory in Canada. So this is not going very well for the Americans. Napoleon collapses in 1814, freeing up British soldiers to deal with the Americans. We're not going to get into Napoleon and the wars that he was waging in Britain or in Europe at this time. That's more of a topic for world history. So all that you need to know in regards to Napoleon at this time is that in 1814 his military conquest is over. But the fact that the British didn't have to defend themselves from Napoleon anymore means that the British can send all of their soldiers to America. So in August of 1814, the British fleet sails to Chesapeake Bay in Virginia and marches on Washington, D.C. The militia defending the city was easily defeated. There was only a militia posted in Washington, D.C. The main American military was still trying to break into Canada. And the British set fire to the White House and the Capitol building, burnt it to the ground. This is something that a lot of people don't realize. There was a time where the White House and the Capitol building being where Congress met, was completely destroyed by the British. Now, this would signal the end of a war to a lot of people. But, we're a country today, aren't we? So, the British attacked Baltimore. Baltimore was ready for the British. They had set up defenses, and the city militia inflicted heavy casualties on the British. Once again, back at this time, city militias and local militias were used to defend the area. They didn't rely as heavily on the national military. After the British bombed Fort McHenry, they retreated, and Francis Scott Key was overjoyed to see the American flag still above the fort. He was so happy to see that the American flag was still flying at the end of this night that he wrote a song about it. You may have heard of it. It's called the Star-Spangled Banner. I'd hope you've heard of that. Events in New Orleans. In December 1814, a British fleet with 7,500 men landed near New Orleans. Now this is a sizable army. And on the 24th of December, the Treaty of Ghent was signed that ended the War of 1812. Unknown to forces in New Orleans, the Battle of New Orleans raged on until January 8th and led to a decisive victory over the British. So, 24th of December, Christmas Eve, the Treaty of Ghent is signed and it ends the War of 1812. But, you got to think back in this time, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have phones, they didn't have all the easy ways that we have today to transmit information. I can pick up my phone right now and call somebody on the other side of the world and tell them whatever I need to. But in New Orleans, they didn't know. They didn't know the war was over. It was over on December 24th, and the Battle of New Orleans goes on until January 8th. So all of this fighting was really unnecessary. And the people of New Orleans were able to defend the city from the British. And due to this, nationalism surged. Now, I'm going to pause for a moment to discuss what nationalism is. Nationalism is defined as pride and supporting your own country. Another word for nationalism can be patriotism. Now, there is an issue whenever... It's the same with any sort of idea. Any idea carried out to the extreme becomes negative. It doesn't matter what sort of idea you have. If you take it to the absolute extreme, that's whenever you're going to have issues. But at this time, nationalism surged and America's prestige and reputation was acknowledged. Defending themselves in the War of 1812 is what really made America their reputation was acknowledged and respected around the world. Okay, that's going to be it for today, guys. To wrap things up, I wanted to talk about Schoology for just a minute. This is what second period Schoology page looks like right now. This is going to be changing. I'm going to get more things on there shortly, but I just wanted to let everybody know that there will be a quiz going up on Schoology soon. I should have that up before the end of the day. And it will cover things that I covered in this video and the last video. So looking back and forth between those two should tell you all you need to know to do well on the quiz. I will give you multiple attempts at the quiz online. I know that not everybody is really used to using Schoology right now, so I'll set up the quiz so that you have multiple attempts on that. And if you know how to get into Schoology, but you're like, oh, Mr. Sims, I'm not in your class, if you go back, you check your email. I did send out an email with my course access codes, and I included everybody that needs the codes in that email. And then if you don't know how to add the course code, if you go look on the other videos on this channel, there is a Schoology video. It's only 2 minutes long, where I walk you through the steps of adding the courses. So, going forward, assignments will be put up on Schoology, and you will be expected to go on there and get them done. Now, I will give you there will be a pretty big window of when you can do these assignments, but the due dates will be clearly marked. So just if you're having any trouble accessing Schoology, the videos, whatever, just send me an email or put it in a comment or send a message to this YouTube channel. I'll get back to you somehow. Okay? So that's going to be it for today, and I hope everybody has a good day, and I hope to see you back in the classroom soon.